Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rabbi's Daughter podcast. I'm Shira, the daughter, and I'm here with my dad. Hello, Abba.
Hello, Shira. Good to see you.
My dad is the rabbi, and today we're going to speak about the education system. In general, mainly about the Haredi system, but also about the teachers, the kids, the tension between the schools and the homes. Anything to add?
The only thing I'd add to that is that this is a very important topic because a lot of people, whether in America, England, the English-speaking world, let's say, one of the main reasons why people are reluctant to come on aliyah is because of the educational system. Yeah. Because they say that here in Israel, the education is less stable, less robust, less good, and therefore, the main thing for us is kids, and we're not coming because of education. I've heard this too many times.
I think I see two main issues. The first one is that many times they come to Israel and they have to choose between Haredi schools and religious Zionist schools. And in America, they don't have to pick that. They can just be in between, which is good. And the second one is also that in very religious schools, usually the limudei chol, science, physics, math.
Right, the general education.
General education is just less good.
Yeah, so you're right. It's for both of those reasons. And I would say that the first reason is often very difficult for Americans who come here to come to terms with. They don't want to go all the way Haredi, which often means also no general education. That's part of going all the way Haredi, but not just. It's also an ideological thing. And at the same time, the spirit, the energy, sometimes the ideology of the religious Zionist world is also not what they're looking for. And therefore, there's a lot of tension there. And it's something very important, I think, to speak about. Number one, perhaps to give a more optimistic framing or outlook on what's going on education in Israel. And number two, just to have people be more informed. Not that this is a kind of information-centered podcast, but I think you can learn something from these conversations. So let's see.
Hope so.
Hope so.
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to speak about is really to map out what we have in the Haredi system. There are many, many different streams, and now it's growing all the time. You have many friends that are opening new schools all the time, and it's changing, which is good. But let's talk about the schools that the family sent to. So you and Mommy, you send us to mainstream Haredi all the way. Did you think about it before you did it, or it was just like that was what we do?
Right. So first of all the way isn't entirely true. Number one, because Nati, our youngest, was in Beit Rabban for like a month.
Yeah, so I remember that month.
That's the exception. Like we tried that for a month or 2 months or something.
It's too far. It was in Neve Yaakov.
It was in Neve Yaakov. It didn't work out well, unfortunately. But we did try that. There was a stint. And also, Abigail, that's not your mainstream Haredi schools.
No, I'm talking about elementary schools, though.
But yeah, elementary and also high schools for most of the kids. And did we think about that? No, we didn't. Like many young couples, don't forget that Mommy grew up here. So she grew up as part of the Haredi system, the education system, and the communities. And I bought into that strongly, meaning from my yeshiva experience and so on, I bought in to being a part of the Israeli Haredi space. And we didn't give it like 2 minutes thought. It wasn't like a question. We're going to send our kids to Haredi schools because we're a part of the Haredi community. And there were no options. It wasn't like there was something to think about between different concepts of Haredi schools, different streams within the Haredi education. We sent our oldest, Moshe, to elementary school. This is 20 years ago. Okay, yeah. More than 20 years ago, Moshe started his track within the Haredi educational system. There were no options. The option was, there was an elementary school in Ramat Aleph, and there was only one, and that was it. Today there are 2 or 3 in the same geographical area. Then there was one, and we sent it without thinking. And the thing is, once you start your journey in a particular track, it's not so easy afterwards to rethink that, because you're already in that
You're
mold.
speaking about the other kids or about like the journey of a child?
Yeah, well, both actually. Once you're in that mold, so for that child, if you've gone to, let's say, a mainstream Haredi place, he's going to have a lot of social pressure to continue on in that stream. And for Moshe, there were still no questions. Even when he transferred to high school, there were still no alternatives. This is before the era of the yeshiva high schools.
Yeah.
There were, Marava was there, but it just wasn't relevant. We're going to send to a place with a boarding school. Wasn't something we were looking for. And even there were no options. I think like after Moshe's first or second year, then I established, together with the Brandwein brothers, we established Chedvas HaTorah, which is, I think, perhaps the first, together with Betel Cohen's one, Chachmei Lev. That's right, but today it has a different name. Today it's called Dat Funot. It was renamed a different principle also, but they started in the same year as we did at Chedvas HaTorah, and those were the first yeshiva high schools that tried to kind of rival the regular boys' high schools, the yeshivot haktanot. Yeah. Those were the first, not boarding schools, not very high tuition, not American style. So those were the first, but it was kind of too late for Moshe. And that also impacted the other brothers, because once you have one kid in one track, because of the differences between the tracks and because of the kind of pressure that's involved from again, today it's much better. But when we were in this space, so, if you send to one school, let's say you send to Yeshiva High School, then your siblings are not going to be accepted into their schools, meaning it's a package deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot of this kind of coercion going on, using kids as a vehicle for policing the families. Don't dare send to an alternative system, because then your kids won't get accepted to the school that you still want to send to. So there's this kind of internal policing. So I think both of those are true. Anyway, we didn't give it too much thought as a young couple. There were no real alternatives, and we got kind of sucked into that track as a default.
Yeah, there's a difference between the boys' tracks and the girls' tracks.
In which way? What do you mean?
Because the boys go through elementary school like Cheder, and then they go to Yeshiva Ktana, and then Yeshiva Gdola, and
then they get married in a koila.
Yeah, Yeshiva Ktana is like from 7:30 till 9 or 10.
Yeah, I mean, our kid used to leave home at 6:30 or 6:45 in the morning, come home at like 10 o'clock at night. That's Yeshiva Ktana.
Yeah, and
very
also
intense.
the differences are big. Like I see Moshe and Chaim and Shlomi in their Yeshivot Ktanot, they really learn to love to learn. And I mean, that's how it seems, at least. And I don't know if Yeshivot Tichoniyot are that good at it also. I mean, they spend more than 12 hours a day just learning.
Well, then are you saying you're surprised that they love to learn?
No, but I'm saying, like, today, would you choose something different? Probably not, because it is a gift to have it. And for girls, it's not that different, because, I mean, you have the Shurei Yahadut and Torah. The differences between the high schools are not so significant, and also the more Haredi the high school is, the less you can actually have a proper conversation with your teachers, and the general education is better in like the less Haredi schools. I mean, it's kind of changing now, but in general that's the case. So the differences for the girls are not that significant.
Well, first of all, you're making a few assumptions that I think it's important to unpack them. The question is, what price do you pay for sending to these schools? Meaning, what price do you pay for sending to your standard mainstream Haredi school, Yeshiva Ktana or girls' high school? Like, what's the downside of that? Because you're saying, in the boys' case, the downside is that you don't get a good general education, right? You don't study math and physics. But the upside is that you get a great Torah education, and you come out with in the case of your brothers at the very least, with a love of Torah, an enthusiasm for Torah, and very highly developed skills in Torah study. While for the girls, you're saying, listen, you're getting a decent general education in these Haredi schools, and that there's no like big downsides from that. And the question is, well,
if you want the belonging, so that's a downside.
Belonging
to
with
the mainstream Haredi schools, that gives you good chiduchim, stuff like that. So that's a downside, you can say, for the.
What do you mean? It's
for the girls' education. If you send them, that's a downside in the less Haredi schools.
Of sending to the new Haredi schools that are less mainstream. Yeah, but let's think about the disadvantages though of the Haredi system, right? The disadvantages there are not just the question of how good a general education you're getting. It's also the outlook. It's also the ideology.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people are afraid of, right? You're getting an ideology which is very, focused on the Haredi enclave, on your Haredi bubble. That's your identity. That's your responsibility. That's your belonging. And that comes, it's a package deal. Israel is not a part of your education.
Yeah.
Yom HaZikaron, Memorial Day for Soldiers, is not a day.
You don't mention that.
It's not mentioned. Yom Ha'atzmaut is not a day. Israel, generally speaking, there's no enthusiasm for belonging to Israel or responsibility for Israel. Even in terms of the relationship with other streams within the Jewish world, the frum Jewish world, right? They don't figure. They're not there. The education is very localized. My
question is though, is in different schools, is it different? Like in the yeshiva tichoniyot, and the less Haredi ones?
Of course it is. I don't know if you want to call them less Haredi, but in the Haredi yeshiva high schools. So over there's a very different attitude towards just the Jewish people generally, towards the state of Israel. Of course, that's a deep part of it. There's a legitimacy of going to the army, meaning going to the army is legitimate. Is there an ethos that you must do army service and otherwise you're not fulfilling your duty? No, it doesn't go that far, but it legitimizes army service. And the truth of the matter is that a large percentage of the boys going to these alternative Haredi schools do end up going to the army, not all of them, but a large percentage do after a couple of years in yeshiva. Each one has his own track, but at the very least, it's a different mindset. It's a different ideology. It's a different worldview within the Haredi space. And alongside the question of the quality of education, that's a big question. And the question is, so what do you want to get out of these schools? What are you looking for? What can you supplement from home?
I guess that's the real downside, because like education, general education, you can manage with it. You can get 2,000 teachers for your kids, and it's something that you can manage with. But the ideology, it's the hard part. For me, it was hard. That was the hard part in my high school. Just
tell me more.
There were so many times my teachers said for me it was such nonsense, especially on Yom HaZikaron. Yom HaZikaron was my least favorite day of school.
Really?
Yeah, since I grew up, since I was 12 or 13.
Okay.
It was like the least favorite day, because they said things like, oh, the soldiers, the reason they die is because they're not from, stuff like that. And it drove me nuts. I was like, what? And it's not like we spoke about it.
A teacher of yours said that sentence?
Yeah, I remember. I was in 7th grade. She said it. And it's not like we spoke about it at home so much. It wasn't still an issue when I was 12. But it just felt so wrong. And I didn't have the words to really fight with her or, have a proper conversation. And also, they're not open for it. They're just like, that's what the rabbi said. And then you can't really speak to them about it.
Right. Our kids today, I think, definitely have the tools to argue the case with the teachers.
Well, our family also changed a bit, and also circumstances changed.
Let me give you an example from yesterday. Okay? One of our kids is in 8th grade. Okay?
Yeah.
And his teacher was busy. He said they speak about Israel and the army now and again in school. And his teacher was busy saying how, of course, we can't be a part of Israel, or we can't identify with the army because, the Rabbanim all said that the state isn't legitimate and they were against the establishment of the state of Israel. By the way, that's a very nuanced question. Agudas Israel was divided about being pro-state, against the state. I'm not going to get into it now. But that was what the teacher said. And Natty, he asked the teacher, he said, he gave a mashal, he gave an allegory about a guy who is living at home, and somebody comes and builds another 2 floors. And now instead of living in this, 1-story house, he now has this wonderful building, and he didn't want it. He was really against it. But now he's got this building. So now what do? Do you destroy the building? Or do you say, well, now that's our building, and now we have to make the best of it? And he asked the teacher, okay, I get it, that we were against the state of Israel, let's say. But then the state was established, and it became this Jewish state. And now we have it. So what do we do now?
That's so good.
That was his question to the teacher. And the teacher's response was, well, clearly these are complicated questions, and we're not going to discuss them
that's what they
in
say.
class.
That's what they used to tell me also. We'll discuss it later, but they never really did.
Right. So you're saying that the ideology is a problem, but, in our family, I think that we were able to handle that, meaning we were able to, at least, like you said, as the family developed, so our thinking also became more sophisticated, more nuanced.
Yeah.
And then we were able to, to tell the kids, listen, that's what they say in school. And we were always very careful, I think, to say you have to respect the schools. You have to respect the institutions.
Yeah.
This is Mommy's favorite line.
Yeah, that was Mommy.
Mommy's favorite line. Okay, you have
And
to
we
respect.
did.
And Baruch Hashem, thank God for Mommy, because otherwise I don't think I would have, held up on that. But Mommy was always strong on that. You have to respect the institution, but it's not how we think. We think differently. And you have to respect the teachers. That's what they say. You shouldn't fight them in class. You shouldn't tell them. By the way, there were times when things were too much for me, that I called the teachers.
You did?
Yes, I called the teachers.
Do you remember any example of that?
Sure, of course. There was a case in one of the boys. I don't remember which one it was, but it was in elementary school. The teacher said that we have to hate all non-Jews. We have to hate all goyim.
We had goyim coming to our house.
That's dumb. It's really bad stuff, though. And so the next day I wrote a note for whichever child it was to give to the Rebbe, to say, that's not what I was taught. And please, give me some sources on that. I'm really interested to know where you're coming from. So he wrote me back a note, and he says, I don't remember, but I think it's an Orach Chaim. Orach Chaim HaKadosh says it. Okay, so I went the next day. I was learning under Rabbi Shavais in the Kollel at the time. I was still in Kollel. So I went to Rabbi Shlita, and I told him, this is what the Rebbe said, and he says there's a source in the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. Can you help me out over here? So he took an Orach Chaim, and he opened it up, and he showed me that the Orach Chaim says that you have to love goyim. So I sent back to the teacher, excuse me, it says the opposite. You have to love at least certain elements of the non-Jewish nations, and he was stumped. But I don't think it helped necessarily, but it was educational for our children. For that child, it was an educational experience.
Once, one of my teachers said something bad about Chilonim, but not from Jews, and it was hard because we have not from family,
yes,
and a lot of them, and they're great, and we love them. So I think Mommy wrote her something.
Mommy wrote her. That's correct. Mommy wrote her, and she apologized.
She has an non-from grandmother. You can't really speak like this about them. But it was less of I have different resources. It was more like it's just inappropriate to speak like that.
Right. And that was important for our education. I don't think it helped for the teachers. Meaning, I don't think next year the Rebbe or your school teacher is going to speak differently. They're part of that system, and that's how they think. But for our children, that was educational. And I want to make one short point about this, which is that it's not simple. Meaning, families often consult with me on these questions. Which school should I send my kids to? And the option that we took of sending to Haredi schools, but trying to balance from home, is not a simple option, because for 2 reasons. Number one, it requires a lot of confidence from the parents. Not every parent is going to have the confidence of telling the kids, respect your institution, but they're wrong, And this is what we think. We think differently. You need confidence. And some of the families that are thinking of making aliyah, let's say, they're saying, we'll be outsiders. We're not Israeli. We won't speak the language well enough. We had that strength of...
Yeah, I can see it in the community. They speak about it all the time.
Yeah, so we had that confidence and strength to be able to do it. It's not so simple. And number two, don't forget social pressure. Meaning, even if your kids are going to grow up with different mindsets and different opinions that they hear at home and so on, at the end of the day, the decisions that they're going to make are going to be very influenced by their peers, by the social environment that they're in. And if everybody else in the class is thinking X, the fact that your children will be thinking Y and will think differently won't necessarily impact the decisions they'll make because of that social pressure. And that's why these alternative Haredi schools are very important.
Yeah, and you can sometimes see the difference between the boys and the girls for that reason, because girls are way more home. You come home at 3. I used to come home before because school was boring, so I just came home before.
Ran away from school. I remember that.
Yeah, I used to go ice skating.
Right.
And the impact that you and mommy and the house in general had on me is probably higher than on the boys, because they're mostly in school. And you can see differences, not just about our family, just in general. You can see differences that boys can be more, not necessarily Haredi, but just more impacted by the schools they're going to.
Boys leave home at the age of, again, from the age of 14. They're in yeshiva all day long, from 7 in the morning till coming home at 10 at night. So they're less at home. And from the age of 17, they don't live at home. From the age of 17, they're in yeshiva gdola, they're boarding away from home. So that's their environment. And you're right, the impact is much deeper on the boys from the social environment, while girls are much more at home. In Chinuch, you're probably aware of this, but in Chinuch, when we found out about, when we did our quote-unquote investigations, finding out for Chinuch purposes, for our boys, meaning we were finding out about girls, the most important meetings that we would have would be with the parents. We wanted to know what the home is like.
Yeah.
What are the parents like? What's their relationship like? What did they say about their girls and so on? Because we appreciated this, that the girls are very much a product of the home, more so than the boys, who are developing their independent personality from a much younger age and within an environment that has a strong, I would say, not social coercion, but a strong impact from what's going on among their peers, among their friends, and in the institution. So you're right. And you see in our family there is a marked difference between, our older boys and older girls. It makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking now, would you send, let's say you could decide your grandchildren, where would they go to? Would you send them to the same schools that you did with us, like Chederim, Beit Yaakov, or because we have other options, you would send them there?
Well, first of all, I would definitely think about sending to the alternative options, because for 2 reasons. First of all, because you don't want there to be too much tension between the school and the home. If there's a lot of tension there, it can be damaging. And again, like I said, you make the best of it. And Baruch Hashem, I think we try to make the best of it. But it's not simple. And if there's a school which is more aligned to the home, then that's good. That's much better. That's what you want. That's number one. Number two, though, I'm a part of that movement. And therefore, you want to put your kids where your mouth is. You're a part of that movement. You want to strengthen it. You want to be a part of it. And so, again, those schools are in the process. They're becoming every year. Every year they're becoming better. They're becoming more robust.
Yeah, there are many.
Yeah, they're becoming, first of all, they're proliferating. There's more of them. And number two, they're improving in their quality. Don't forget, I taught several years at Chedvas. I'm still very involved in a whole bunch of these schools. And I can see the kind of families that are sending, the kind of boys and girls who are going to the girls' school and boys' school, it's a package deal. You need the girls' school also because of ideology. Don't forget, in the school that you went to, you left after 12th grade. You didn't even stay for 13, 14.
What? It's not just I left after 12th grade. Everything they said about Judaism, about Israel, about everything, just I never listened to. It's not like it bothered me that much. I mean, after 9th grade or 10th grade, I stopped trying to have a conversation with my teachers. It was just useless. So I would sit down and draw stuff and
first of all, that's it's
keep myself busy, and I wouldn't listen to what they said.
Yeah, so
and that's a shame. Like, these are important
exactly
years.
It's a shame. It's just a shame. So you don't want that. You don't want your kids to have to black out half of what they're hearing because the home doesn't agree, or because you don't want the girls to follow that. For example, the concept of in your school that there were, what's the most central important slogan in the school you went to? I can tell you what I heard, but what would you say?
Well, they always wanted us to just be like them.
No, but what's the slogan?
Oh, I don't know.
Beit shel Torah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right?
That was in my interview. In my interview to my high school, she asked me what's the most important thing in life. And I said, and I really liked my answer. You know, I said something like to learn and to grow. Something like that. It was like a good answer. And I was 13.
Right, learning and growing. Pretty decent, okay. I like that.
And she looked at me with a smile and she said, Torah. And I was like, oh, right, yeah, sorry.
Right, but that idea of Beit Shel Torah, which means a Torah home, which means marrying an Avrech for life and supporting him by going to work, that's the ethos, right? And that's the exclusive ethos. And it's a problem, not just because you need to balance it from the home and to provide an alternative ethos, but also, like you said, because you don't gain as much from the school. You're not able to have those deep conversations. You're not able to have that, to thrash things out properly, because the school doesn't allow for that. There's no space for that.
In 12th grade, that was the only thing they spoke about. Because they knew we were going to leave. Some of us are going to leave. And they wanted to keep us in the school. So that was like the main thing they spoke about. It was, you get married with a guy that is learning, and you support him, and how good it is and how amazing it is, and it's the right thing, and it's what you should do. And it drove me nuts because you were an avrech, but in our house it was always you were you were.
I was for a while, yes.
For a long while, but you were providing. Mommy wasn't working.
Right.
And I really
we didn't live this ideal model.
I just don't think it's a good model. I think that, there was, or at least that was what the teachers said, it was a horat sha'ah.
Right, like a temporary directive.
Directive, yeah. That women should provide because the Torah world was just destroyed.
1 minute, your teachers told you it's a temporary directive?
Well, yeah, but
so when does it end?
They didn't
What's
mean it.
What's the sell-by date? What does it stop?
Because when you say horat sha'ah, it doesn't sound like you say temporary in English. You don't say it. This word doesn't exist there. It's not like you say it's money. Horat sha'ah.
They didn't say hazmanit. They didn't say temporary. It's like a rasha. This was what our rabbi said, but they still say
it's a very vague term. And I would sit there and I would be like, okay, well, that means that it's not ideal. Because they had to make this directive because the Torah world was so destroyed. Like, there was nothing there, so they had to do something in order to build it. But now it's built, so we have to go back to what's ideal, which is, men have to work, they have to provide. Now, I do think there is a big value for men that are learning for a year, for 2. It's great. Yeah, you can do it. It's amazing. But to say that that's the ideal to learn your whole life, I just don't think it's true. And I used to sit there and they wouldn't listen to what I said.
Right. So I don't know if I would say, like you said, in a very absolute way, that it's a bad model. But I would say let people choose. It's not the model that we want to educate all of our children into espousing, into adopting as an exclusive model. It's a model that if you want to choose it and you want to sacrifice and you have a husband that wants to become the next rabbinic leader and a wife that wants to sacrifice, in order to enable that and so on, I think good for you. But that has to come from a choice. And I think in the Haredi education system, that idea of making personal choices is not emphasized. That's like one of the big differences, I would say, between the, let's say, religious Zionist, non-Haredi, let's just say, educational system and the Haredi education system is that the question of your choice, the choices, the autonomy, the choices that you need to make later on in life to decide between different legitimate, good models of couplehood, of family, of life going forwards. Are you going to spend more years in yeshiva or go to the army? That's a good choice.
They don't really have it though now.
Where? In the Haredi space?
Yeah.
Right. That choice doesn't exist in the Haredi space. I'm saying in the new Haredi schools, these yeshivot tichoniyot, these Haredi high schools and so on.
I worked in Chedvat Torah for like 2 months.
Right.
As like some secretary.
You did a short
back
stint
then.
there.
Yeah.
I remember.
They had like very few kids that went to the army, and they saw it as a failure.
Right. It's true. They did
maybe
not
now
encourage.
It's different.
They did not encourage it at the time, but it's different. Don't forget, these yeshiva high schools are making a journey, and it's a journey that goes step by step. They certainly didn't want boys to go directly to the army straight from high school. They wanted them to have some time in yeshiva before that. And that's what a lot of the boys did. They went for a couple of years to yeshiva, and then they ended up going to the army. In fact, when I went to Chashmonaim, the base, a couple of boys tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hi, Arav." And these are guys that were in Chedvas. And they did a few years in yeshiva Gdolah, in yeshiva, and then they went to the army. I was very proud of them. I was very happy to see them there. That was a very nice moment for me. But you're right, it's a process. And I think that idea of choice is also very important for these olim. We mentioned at the beginning, the olim coming from let's say, the English-speaking world. That concept of having some, autonomy, of making informed choices between legitimate options is something that you expect. You don't want to be kind of pigeonholed. You don't want to be constrained, right, into one kind of very narrow track. And this is what you're funneled onto, this kind of conveyor belt mentality, like a seret na, that everyone is funneled into the same thing. You start from cheder, yeshiva ktana, yeshiva gdolah, shidduch, kollel, and then you wake up at 35 and you say, goodness, I have 5 kids. What do I do next? This is not what, people from English-speaking countries generally are looking for. And that's why, having these alternative institutions is so important.
Yeah. I can really see the difference between friends who feel like they have a choice and friends who don't see anything else that is possible. I have good friends that they decided to marry a guy that would sit and learn, and their ideal is that would be for the rest of his life. And so I have a friend that she decided to go to study computers instead of medicine. She felt like studying medicine, kind of, but she said, look, this is what I want. And
I want a husband in learning.
Yeah, so
and
it's
if I study medicine, that's
yeah.
not going to work because I'll have too many
she
years.
Said it's worth it for me. I want to do this that way, and I know I can decide different, and my parents will support me, and it will be fine. But this is what I want, and she's happy about it, and she just finished it, and she loves it. And you can see the difference because she actually made a conscious choice. She knew what she was going to have, and she wanted this.
Right, and the other option she saw as a legitimate option, but it's not what she wants.
Yeah, it was something she could do, but she decided she doesn't want it.
Got it.
There are other girls,
other friends of yours, I'm sure.
Other friends that they don't see anything else as an option.
Right.
I remember Abigail once met one of my friends. She was studying.
Abigail, your younger sister.
Yeah, she was studying. This friend was studying computers or something like that. And she met her and they spoke about it, and Abigail asked her, do you like it? And she said, well, I'm going to make a lot of money from it. And she was like happy about it. And Abigail said, yeah, but do you enjoy it? She said, like, you have no idea how much money I can make from it. That was like the conversation. And I I was like, it's fine to do it. I'm all in favor, do what's good for you, but you have to know what you're sacrificing for it. If you're learning something you don't like, you have to know, yeah, I'm doing this because it's worth it for me. But not to just say, yeah, it's good. And then one day you'll be in a job you don't like and it's not fun.
Right. So, in the past, the alternative, and even today, in our community in Ramot Bet, there are families who have this dilemma to send to the Haredi school system and to pay those prices and to manage with them. And like I said, those prices are coming down because of the alternative Haredi schools, or to send to a kind of high-level religious Zionist school. And then also to kind of supplement from home the kind of things that you don't necessarily want from that space, from the religious Zionist space. And it's fascinating to see this, because a lot of the people making aliyah are people who are kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
Like the real Haredim, like the Lakewood Haredim, are generally not making aliyah, unfortunately, because they don't have an ethos of aliyah. They don't have an ethos of
Zionism.
of Israel, of Zionism, or just of they don't look at Israel as changing the role or the definition of what the Jewish people is. They look at, we're still in Galus, we're still in exile, and now we can go to Eretz Yisrael and fulfill the mitzvahs of Trumas and Maasros. Mitzvot hatzluyot ba'aretz. Like that's what's going on over here. They don't see Israel as taking the Jewish people to a next level, to a level of statehood, to a level of national realization, to a level of fighting wars of good against evil on a whole different plane, on a whole different level than we were able to do before. So from their perspective, like, why go to Israel? It's just not, it's not on the map. Who are the ones that are making aliyah? It's the people who are, on the one hand, they're yeshiva graduates, they're yeshivish, but they're more in the middle. They're like the right wing of YU, if that helps you at all. It's not the Lakewood people, and then they have this dilemma.
Yeah.
And if we want to augment, to encourage aliyah, then it's very important to deal with education, to strengthen the educational options that you have in this space, alongside the excellence of the institutions. That they should actually be good educational institutions. Sometimes in the Haredi space, how does a school get set up? Some guy, needs a parnasa, he needs an income, so he sets up a school. And it doesn't often come from a place of a deep educational ethos that is looking for educational excellence.
Yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to speak about, is about the differences in the teachers, because now the Haredi schools for girls, they're under Misal Chinuch, so teachers have to go through.
They always were.
Yeah, but the schools for boys, that's like completely private. They can do whatever they want. And yesterday I was going back from Kiryat Shmona, and this woman gave me a ride. And she's a principal of a school in Baka.
Right.
Just from school, but from
like religious Zionist.
Yeah. Not very strong, but she's a good principal.
Religious light.
Yeah. And she said they have Haredi friends that they went there once, and she spoke to the kids about the schools, because they knew she was a principal, so they spoke about it. And one of the kids said that when his teacher gets upset, so he smacks him. Not a
today,
big
nowadays.
One. That was probably a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
And she was shocked. She was like, what is this mess? And she told the parents, what's going on? They said, yeah, but we can't really get him to a different school, because then in the Shiluchim, it's going to be hard for him.
Right, meaning they accept, they pay the price. It's worth it for them to pay the price because they want the Shidduch and they want to be in that society. It's interesting that you bring this up, because I'll tell you. you mentioned private, that the Haredi schools are private, as opposed to the girls' schools that are state schools, right? They're Mukar She'eno Rishmi, meaning they're not formally, they're formal schools without having the full recognition, state recognition, but they are formally part of the state system. Now, on the one hand, that means that a lot of the teachers in the traditional Haredi institutions have not had the teacher training. They don't have degrees often, meaning very often. They generally won't have degrees. Nowadays, some of these teachers are getting degrees because they want to expand their options of where they'll be able to teach. They want to perhaps teach in some of these new Haredi schools that are looking for, right, they're state schools, so they need people with degrees. So they don't have degrees, they don't have teacher certification, they don't have anything. They come out of Kollel and they become teachers. And then, your expectation from them is limited. How will they be able? But sometimes over time, right, they gain experience. Sometimes those who choose education are actually educators, and sometimes they will become, great teachers. And the interesting thing is the fact that it's private has advantages, because if they're bad teachers, you know what will happen? They'll be fired. Meaning, while in your state schools in Israel, you can't fire bad teachers. It's at the very least, it's a process which is grueling and it's not impossible.
You can't really
it's
do
almost
that.
Impossible to fire teachers.
That's something that is messed up with the education system in Israel.
Correct. And therefore, you see, a lot of Haredim are saying, we need to improve. We're not good enough. The state, the state save us. Hamidina tatzilenu. Please, state, save us. And then we have these mamach schools, which are Haredi state schools. And I'm still in two minds a little bit about that, because I think that we need to save ourselves. We don't want to be calling out to the state and saying, oh, please, dear state of Israel, save us. In the past 500 years, let's go back a bit. Jewish education was the envy of the world. In Poland, in wherever it was, in Europe, everywhere. People looked at the Jews and said, wow, those guys have got it right. They know how to educate their kids. They're not getting drunk in the bars. They're not, wasting their lives or whatever it is. And that's why the Jews had the protection of the noblemen, because the Jews were the ones who knew how to read and write. They knew how to formulate contracts. They knew how to do stuff. Jewish education was far and away the pride, the envy of wherever Jews happen to be. And today, once we have a state, our state education is not the envy of the world. We're not doing very well in terms of international measures, and good international measures. You could say the international measures are bad, but some of them are decent. They measure education. We're not doing so great. So, the Haredi schools, the private ones, like you say, it's true. They're not teaching the kind of breadth of education that we would like for our kids. But what they do teach, they do pretty well. Meaning kids come out of, I can't say that about all kids, and that's part of the problem, that they're good for certain types of kids.
Yeah.
But, for our family, let's say, we have a kid now in 8th grade. He's coming out, unbelievable skills. Unbelievable. Right. He knows how to learn Gemara on his own, to read a daf on his own with Rashi and with Tosfos. And because he was always looking for more, the teachers gave him more. They said, you know what, you want more? Here, take this book, study grammar. Take this, study this. And you can have that in a private system. So meaning,
most
it's interesting.
Kids are not, I wouldn't be like that. I'm not the type that would
Fine,
take
you're
a grammar
right. Of
book.
course, it depends on the child. Absolutely. But I'm saying that, it would be nice to be able to take these, private schools. And they're not totally private.
I think in general, it would be nice to have private schools in Israel.
It would be nice to have an opportunity to have private schools alongside the state schools. And it would be nice if the Haredi system could develop, but without having to have the state save us. Meaning that and there are efforts to do that in certain schools. To say, you know what, we're a cheder, we're a private school, but we appreciate that we need English and math. We need to give our kids
And they do it?
tools. And there are schools, yes, that are doing this.
I mean, because
in
it's easier.
Yerushalayim,
It's not just the state save us. It's just they get so much money for it.
well, once you become a mamach, you get 100% funding.
Yeah.
And when
so
you're not,
like
then
if you're getting the kids in your school to study math and English, then it's already worth it to just bring the whole thing and get the funding.
right, on the one hand. But on the other hand, there are still, I guess, because there are these schools around, there are still families out there in the Haredi space that they want the kind of cheder method. They want that kind of private school method, while at the same time they want their kids to have these basic tools. You know, I once got me into a lot of trouble about 10 years ago, more. At the beginning, when I was just coming into this space, so I said it in some talk that it's criminal that our schools don't teach our kids English. I said those words. I said it's a pesha. I said it's criminal. And that got me blacklisted. Meaning the different, Haredi activists or whatever, they said, okay, he's next on our blacklist. We see this guy, he's like, he's getting some public space and he's making these statements. We need to... So
and really, we speak English at home.
And English, yeah.
But if we wouldn't, it would be really hard.
It would. I think English, I still think it's criminal not to teach English. And I think even if you want to be an Avreich sitting and learning for as many years as possible for the rest of your life, whatever you want to call it, knowing English opens you up to such a range, number one, of, in the Torah world, a range of opportunities of what you can do within the Torah world, be parts of conversations, be a part of this dynamic space. It gives you so much, aside from just basic function in the world. Basic function, sending an email. You see these Haredi emails.
Oh, you can
phone
always
number,
see them. There's one letter and then a phone number.
Phone number. First of all, you're giving away your phone number. Second way, you're declaring, I'm a Haredi guy that doesn't know ABC. It's crazy.
It's funny how you can detect them. I always realize, okay, that's a Haredi guy.
I know, but it's you've got to know ABC. We're living in a world where that's so basic. Chazal say there's an obligation to teach your kid umanut, a profession. So you know what? We're not teaching professions, fine, but at the very least, basic skills to be able to get on, to be able to function in our modern society.
To be able to get a profession if you wanted to.
If you want, or just to function, basic, to understand, you go to a doctor's surgery, I don't know, you're going to have ABC there, basic functions, and that, I think that's really criminal. And I see yeshiva guys, and Baruch Hashem, the yeshiva guys today, they all want to study English.
They do.
Yeah, they're borrowing kids' books. They take out kids' books to be able to start learning English themselves. And that's really criminal. It's not okay. And like you said, okay, so we made the best of it because we speak English at home. Okay, good for us. But for so many families, that doesn't happen. And that's really that's a deep problem. And that's why, and by the way, the alternative schools, the good thing that I see there is that they are applying pressure on the traditional schools to have English and math. In places like Beit Shemesh, where you have a lot of Haredim that are more open-minded, more modern.
And they have many mamachim there.
And they have mamach schools. And that's a real challenge. And the rabbis are saying, no, it's forbidden, but it doesn't help. They're sending there anyway. So the trend there is that even the traditional chadorim, the traditional Haredi schools will introduce English and math. I don't trust them because they'll do it just in order to be, as we say, yotezayin. They'll do it in order to say we have English and math, but they won't do it on a high level and they don't have any transparency. And so I don't trust them to do it properly, but you see that they're feeling the bite.
But it's
and that's
something.
good. Yeah, you see that things are happening.
Capitalism.
It's competition.
Yeah.
Right. And you see it's working even in that Haredi space. And that's a big deal. And overall, I have to say I'm very optimistic because I see that in the space, when did I establish, again, I was a partner in establishing Chedvas HaTorah. When did that happen? That was in 2013. Okay, 12 years ago. It's not a long time.
Yeah.
Since Chedva Torah was established, there's already now like tens of schools like that. Maybe tens is an exaggeration, but
I think
if you look nationally across the country, tens of schools like that, meaning there's a growth rate, right, which is impressive, and you know, who was it? Shai Piron set up Mamach. When was that? Like also, I don't know, 15 years ago. I don't know how long. He was the education minister. Set up Mamach. In the beginning, it struggled. You know, it was really taking its baby steps in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, you see this exponential curve. It starts growing much faster at a much more impressive rate of growth, and I think that gives you a lot of optimism, because you see that parents want it. You see there's demand. You see that, and also in all of the polling, in the surveys, Haredi parents want their kids to have English and math. They want it. Once they want it enough, it'll change.
It does. You see it changing now.
When we were trying to get you into high school, into a Haredi high school, and it wasn't easy, because
I remember it.
Even then, this is going back a few years, even then, Pfeffers had a name for themselves, and it wasn't easy to get you
Pfeffers, that was you
into school. Yes, or this particular branch of the Pfeffer family, right, had issues, and I was speaking.
It was never easy with our kids.
It was at the beginning. Never. It was easy, but once.
I mean, elementary schools are always easy,
yeah,
because they're local.
No, in Cheder it's not easy, but whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But I mean, if you want, we can. But but I just want to say the conversation with him, and I was telling him, like, why are you giving us trouble?
Him? Oh, the
principal. He died already since then. Harav Rov, and I was asking him, why are you giving us trouble? Like, you know, best girl in the class, you know, the envy of the school. You know, like, what's up? Like, you know, he says, Rav Pfeffer, I'll tell you, we're a business. He said, we're a business. And I do what the parents want. And if parents have blacklisted you, meaning if enough parents have come to me and said, you know, watch out for the Pfeffer family, you know, and these are our friends in Ramot Aleph, you know, you can imagine who these people might be. I never investigated. If that's what parents are saying, then that's what we care about, because we're a business. We need to.
That's what I don't like about Haredi high schools.
Schools in general.
They are a business.
They are a business. You're right. And it's a family business. And there's
like the principal is the cousin of this teacher, and our sisters, and yeah.
Right. And there's a challenge between educational ethos and an educational, you know, belief in excellence, or wherever you want to take it, and between being a business. You know, there's a trade-off between those two attitudes. From it,
you know,
they make good money, of course,
so
but the most of the money is from the Yud Gimel Yud Dalet, and that's weakening because less girls are going there. A different story. Yeah. Anyway, bottom line, so that there's a downside to that, because you're a business. The upside is that you have to be attuned to what the parents want, and if enough parents want X, you're going to do that. And that's why the schools stopped forcing everybody to study education. When your mother was studying, she had to do education, even though she wanted to study music, and she studied music, but she also studied education. Why? Because the rabbi said everyone has to study education. They stopped doing that. Why? Because parents threatened to take their girls elsewhere because we're not interested in studying education. Meaning, at the end of the day, there's a lot of power to the parents, power to the people. And if enough people shift, which is happening, then the schools also shift. And that's an upside.
Yeah. So I think we discussed a lot of the benefits and costs of the Haredi system. I want to ask one last
Educational
question.
System. Yeah.
Education system. Well, yeah. It's combined.
Yes.
I want to ask one last question. What would you say to someone that is now thinking about doing aliyah, and he says, like, I don't want to go because of the education system?
Right. So first of all, anyone thinking of making aliyah, I would first of all say come, because we need you. Because we need you here. We need you to be a part of this dynamic, a part of this growth. We need you over here, because I feel that the Dafka, specifically Anglos, are part of the mission and can contribute so much. And this is the future of the Jewish people. This is, I don't have to tell you, Shira. I'm excited about just being here, about being a part of this. And I would say come and be a part of it. And on education, I would say two things. First of all, it's not like staying in America. It's not like you have any guarantees. You know, America and England, whatever, it's true. You have robust institutions that have been around for 100 years. And it's impressive. I'm not taking that away from them. It's impressive. But there's no guarantee. You know, America has its opioid crisis, you know, drugs and stuff. Every place has its challenges. And it's not like America is without its challenges. And there's no guarantees. You still have to daven. You need your siyata d'shmaya. And that's true everywhere, irrespective of where you are. That's number one. Number two, I would say the educational system here is so much broader today than it was 10 years ago. All good. There's so many. It happens to our younger generation, sure. It's good, right? There's so much. The options that are available today are so much richer than those just 10 years ago. You know, if we're thinking 10 years down the line from today, I'm 100% certain that the options will just carry on expanding, carry on becoming deeper, broader, more robust, more impressive. And that's a process that I think it's exciting to be a part of.
Yeah.
So whoever...
I also feel it like you can be in between and it's fine. Like you don't...
Right.
You can get the values and you can get the education and...
Much more than before, much more than previously. And I don't know if I want to use the word in between, because in between sounds like, you know, not here and you're not there.
In between, just with your set of values.
You can preserve those values of, on the one hand, wanting a strong and stable Torah education. That's what people are afraid of. You know, what's going to happen to our kids? They might go off the derech. Who knows what's going to be? And they're afraid of redesigning this because our daughters will come back with short skirts. And again, I'm not categorizing, but that's what people are afraid of. And afraid of the Haredi space, that they'll be closed-minded and say they just want to, you know, the girl just want to marry this Avreich or whatever it is. You know, that people are afraid of that binary model, black and white, extreme. There's a place today which is growing and strengthening, becoming stronger, that is going to provide a way of, on the one hand, being stable in the religious sense, but also preserving those values of civic values, of being a part of the world, of being a part of Israel. And it's up to you, I would say, it's up to you, to contemplating aliyah, to come and be a part of that, and be a part of that, you know, exciting space and dynamic, and the future of the Jewish people. Really, it's the future of Am Yisrael is what's going on over here. So that's my pitch. Thank you for asking that question, Shira.
So I think in that optimistic note we'll end. Thank you, Abba.
We'll wrap it up. Thank you very much, Shira. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, everyone, for listening and for watching. And join us for the next one. Shkoyach.